Oh, hi, I didn't see you there. My name's Jet Jaguar. We're here at the Recording Conservatory of Austin. This show is produced by Matt Sanborn, otherwise known as Waterboy. Full credit for all production, timelines, beginnings, starts, endings, and all editing to Waterboy Matt Sanborn. All right, so thank you for showing up this week. Hey, buddy. How you doing? This is becoming a regular feature on the stream where I'm doing the intro and then my man here shows up. Let's do this always. I super like it. All right, so who was it I decided you looked like last week? Joe Dirt. Joe Dirt. That's right, it's Joe Dirt. A little bit, yeah. All right, so live streaming today. Our topic is overdubbing. A couple of things to get out of the way. If you're watching online, and I want to encourage anybody who's here that you can watch online if you can't be here. Being here, of course, is always the best way. You get that tactile experience. You can touch, taste, and smell the Jaguar in all of its glory. And for you guys online, you're super missing out on all of those tactile experiences. Yes, there's that. Be here, be pleased, but you can also be online. The stream, we start at 7:45 on the button, or 7:42, apparently, sometimes.
We start when I say we start.
We start when Waterboy says we start. With that said, the stream is usually a little delayed on YouTube, so if you're here at 7:45, you will definitely catch the beginning of the stream online. If you're coming in person, we ask that you be here at 7:30 to help set up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Students, you're required to be in one place or the other. Welcome, new guys. All right, so overdubbing. To give you a general overview of what we're doing today. Oh, and by the way, you can ask questions in the comments, and Waterboy will either holler them at me in real time, or we'll get to them at the end, depending on the appropriate time and place to answer those questions. Questions can range from super relevant, i.e., what is that mic you're using right there, to super general and irrelevant, i.e., where do babies come from? I will answer anything you can possibly think of, and I'll give it a shot, right? So please don't hesitate to ask. There are no stupid questions, except the ones you don't ask. I've always liked that one. I think it's a pretty good one. So with that said, moving on to an overview of today's subject matter, we're going to be doing overdubbing. And today is our first seminar in overdubbing. Next week, there will be no live stream. Brad Calhoun will be doing an in-house, very, very special seminar. Waterboy will be on vacation. Where are you going, Waterboy? Houston. It's going to Houston. I will be in Europe, doing Rome, Venice, and London. So I guess Houston is cool too, though, probably. So next week we'll be off for live stream. You guys be here for Brad's seminar. It's going to be super Brad, just Calhoun. It'll be more overdubbing stuff. He'll probably get a little more specific, a little more tonal with it. Today we're going to be very technical, very general. We're going to have an overview lecture on the levels of studio signal, some general concepts as to how to relate the different pieces of studio gear, how to make, in general, things match up. This piece of gear talk to this piece of gear, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then we'll go into some really specific examples with a guitar amp, maybe with a microphone, maybe with an acoustic guitar, depending on what we have time for today. Okay, so to dive right into it, and this is where in the future we're going to have super good diagrams and just like graphics, right, Waterboy?
Sure.
Yes, yes. So the first concept I want to talk about are the levels of signal that we deal with in the studio. And maybe let's even back up one level to talk about sounds and how they relate to signals. So when we say signal, what do we mean? Anyone want to take a shot at the definition of the term signal?
Data received from some source.
Data received from some source. Good. Okay, so what I love about this is that you use the word data, information. Yes, because a signal could take many forms. A signal could be a digital signal. A signal could be an analog signal, but in both cases, the data, the information contained in the two signals describes the modulation of some kind of energy in one of the two first domains of audio, being the analog or acoustic domain. So in the acoustic domain, in the real world of sounds in which human beings hear sounds, yeah? What we hear are pressure waves conducted through a medium, in most cases air, I suppose, if you put your head underwater, right? So reaching back into those first few weeks, or if you're in your first few weeks, reaching forward into your next couple of weeks of just basic audio science. Yes, so pressure waves, which move through a medium and move transverse through the medium in order to give us this, what we see on a diagram as an up-down increasing and decreasing of a particular energy over time, right? So, but what we have in the air is waves of pressure that move through the air, pushing little pockets of pressure that create behind them little pockets of lower pressure. So pockets of high pressure, that's our compression, and then pockets of low pressure, that's our rarefaction, cause your eardrum to either compress or depress, backwards or forwards, yeah? Compress or rarefact is where you would call it, compression, rarefaction, which in turn creates the sensation of sound through your eardrum. We'll leave the rest of sound biology for the classroom. Just suffice it to say that what we have are these pressure waves, right? And then in the analog domain, we have transduced those pressure waves into modulated voltage. We take an electrical signal, we set it to a 0 point, so we just have consistent voltage along the electrical circuit, and then we use a transducer, in most cases a microphone or electromagnetic pickup of some kind, to modulate that voltage, to give it increased voltage, decreased voltage, so we get positive and negative values from 0, representing the same information contained in that signal wave, right? Contained in that pressure wave in the air. So the signal could be said to be within that pressure wave in the air. Sound could be said to be signal, right? Technically speaking, it's only ever sound in the acoustic domain. That sound becomes signal as soon as we transduce into the analog domain. That signal becomes data once we move into the digital domain, and we translate that signal into binary code, into pure information, into simple values stated over time in a quantized nature. So once that occurs, the signal continues to be what we would consider signal as long as it's moving across, it's moving somewhere. Technically speaking, on a hard drive, it would be data, and then as soon as you send that data somewhere to be used, the sending of it would create a signal. So that could be a digital signal, which would be binary code, or an analog signal. So for the purpose of today's discussion, all of the signals we're going to be talking about occur in the analog domain. We could sort of consider the signal steady state in the acoustic domain in that it's just pressure waves in the air. There's really only one way in which that happens. Kinetic energy moves air molecules, that is all. There's really only one sort of frame of reference for that, which is the human ear. But within the analog domain, there are many different frames of reference. We could have what we consider a loud signal to a particular piece of gear that might be considered a very quiet signal to another piece of gear. Does that make sense? Okay, so those levels of signal, we basically have three thresholds, three big paradigm shifts between the levels of signal that we deal with. What are those three major levels of signal in the analog domain? Anybody?
Mic line and I forgot that one.
Instrument.
Instrument.
Right, okay. So yes, you want to take a stab at explaining the difference between mic line and instrument level signals?
Ooh, I know mics come in the quietest. They require boost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the lines are the loudest. Instruments in the middle.
Yeah, totally. And that's a great way to think of it. So mic level signals are basically your raw signals. They come in from microphones. Microphones sometimes need a little phantom power in the case of condenser microphones or some powered ribbon microphones. In some cases, no phantom power, but in any case, the signal that comes out of the microphone is very, very low level. That's what we call mic level signal. They are the lowest level signals that the analog system can possibly deal with. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have line level signals. Line level signals are consistently high level signals. These are high voltage compared to the low level signals. Line level signals are the signal levels at which gear talks to other gear. So when you have a preamp communicating its signal to, say, an EQ, communicating its signal to, say, a compressor, communicating its signal to an analog to digital converter, all of those communications are made at line level. Does that make sense? So if we were to plug a microphone directly into an EQ that was expecting a line level signal that was used to be being plugged into a preamp, for example, which puts out a line level signal, we would expect the signal level into that EQ to be incredibly low and probably unusable. So the main difference between these three echelons of signal, mic level, instrument level, and line level, is that when you move down or up an echelon, essentially you should consider the signals unusable. Now, that is crossing into a big gray area in audio where basically anytime someone tells you something is out of bounds, the first thing you should do is just go do that thing and see what it sounds like. Remember, so as digital technology became a usable thing in the late 80s, the first digital record, the first fully digital production to hit the charts was the Breakthrough Dire Straits record, so the one with Sultans of Swing on it. That was 1987, and between that point and from then on, it was basically considered gospel within the audio community that passing zero and digital clipping never sounded good. It would never sound good. Nobody would ever like it. You don't clip digital. You don't ever clip digital. Yeah, well, and then Daft Punk, and now everybody loves clipping digital. So, point being that tastes evolve. Going outside of the boundaries is always a cool thing to do when you know that you're outside. So what's going to happen, let's predict. What's going to happen if we plug, say, a line level signal into a preamp that expects a mic level signal? Overload it. What's that going to sound like? Distortion, right? Which, if you want a clean vocal sound, is untenable. The signal is unusable. The thing is, if you want a crazy vocal from hell that sounds crazy distorted, that might be the dopest thing you could try. So, again, the one man's unusable is another man's starting point, right? But that said, these mismatches will create inevitable either distortion or low-level signal that's, again, unusable, quote unquote. Okay, so mic level signals, instrument level signals, line level signals. We have the general signal flow that we expect in the studio being mic level sources feed preamps. The function of a preamp is to bring a mic level source up to line level in order that the analog to digital converter can convert it into digital cleanly. So in general, and actually in practice everywhere I've ever encountered this, analog to digital converters, grab a seat, dude. Or not. You can lurk if you want to. So in general, analog to digital converters want a line level signal. Their whole calibration is based on receiving a signal at line level. So you plug a microphone into an analog to digital converter, what should you expect? Wrong. Unusably low signal. So you'd expect basically nothing. If you even register a signal, it'll be so low that the converter can't even really track it with any validity. And then if you were to bring the level up from that signal, you'd have to use so much gain that you'd have an incredible amount of noise. Signal to noise ratio. Okay, so mic level signals come into preamps. The function of the preamp is to bring the signal up to line level so that the converter can receive a line level signal and convert it into digital. Yeah? Okay. So in the middle here, we have this instrument level setting. Instrument level is basically everything between mic level and line level. In general, there's a big jump between anything that considers itself instrument level and anything that considers itself mic level. There's kind of a no man's land in between there of just what you'd consider hot mic signals before you get to what we would consider kind of a low level instrument signal. Think like the output from a passive guitar, something like that. Gibson SG over there would output a low-level instrument signal. But that's much, much louder than even the loudest signal coming out of the loudest microphone, which would require a preamp to get anywhere near line level. So we need to start matching these levels. Guitar amps, for example, expect instrument level. So if you plug a microphone into a guitar amp, it's going to be super low level. If you plug a mic into a preamp and then plug that into a guitar amp, it's going to be super hot. So plugging mic level in is kind of untenable. Plugging line level in, same kind of difference. Again, maybe break these rules, see if something's cool. But this is what you should expect, is basically what we would call unusable signal. So with that concept in mind, we can talk again about our standard signal chain, mic to pre goes to patch bay, mic to patch bay to pre to patch bay goes to conversion, and in that we have two different jumps in signal level. The mic level signal hits the preamp jumps to line level, which jumps to our analog to digital converter, which hits a digital converter, and then that's going to come back out digital to analog at line level and hit our speakers at line level. Yeah? Okay. So instrument level being in the middle there, that's where we would sort of pick up this thread if we wanted to work on some less standard overdubbing scenarios. So we are starting, say, instrument level. Going to plug a guitar into, say, a mic preamp, just because we want to get the direct sound right out of the guitar. How's that going to work? What level does the guitar put out? Instrument level, right. And the mic pre expects what level?
Line level.
The mic pre puts out line level.
Oh, it expects
Expects mic level, yes, exactly. So the mic pre expects mic level. So the guitar, what kind of signal should we expect if we plug it right into a mic pre?
Really hot.
Too hot, right. Which again, it's a guitar, that might be awesome. And some of the earlier cooler, sort of fuzzier guitar tones, or I guess it's technically hardcore overdrive tones, were achieved by just plugging straight into mic pre's with guitars and getting some real heavy crunch. But yes, you'd expect it to be overdriven, and in that sense, maybe unusable for your purposes. So what would we need to do in order to bring that signal to where it needs to go to plug it into a mic pre? Attenuate it with a DI box, yes. So DI box stands for direct in box. Yeah. Yep. Cool. Active direct box. This is a radial J48. Is this cool, Waterboy?
Yeah, you can also show those camera if you want to close it.
Good. This is a radial J48. This is an active direct box. What does the active part mean? Powered. Yeah. So in this case, the J48 is designed to take power from where? Wrong. Phantom power. So if you plug this into a mic pre, which is what it's designed for, plug the XLR into a mic pre, then you would use the phantom power on the mic pre to power the J48. The purpose of a box is what? You said it already? Attenuate, right. So we're going to attenuate the instrument level signal. What does attenuate mean? Reduce, yeah, to bring down. Attenuate, in specific, attenuation would mean to bring down without changing. So we're trying to bring the level of the signal down, but keep it as intact as we can proportionally to the original signal. So we're trying to reduce all of the values within the signal by a proportional amount. Yes, so we want to bring the instrument level signal down to mic level in order that the preamp can handle the input in a clean way, right? So the other side of this, there's also a through section. The through can be used to go on to the guitar amp. So in this case, what we can do with the DI box is actually split the signal as well. So DI boxes are useful for splitting the signal and for attenuating signals from instrument level to mic level. That's the function of a DI box. So you might use these in tracking of any kind, but specifically for overdubs for things like guitars, these come in real handy. Now, the specific example we're going to do today is going to be a guitar, but this kind of tracking could be done for any type of input source, whether it's a keyboard or some kind of synth or any type of instrument input that has an analog signal that goes with it. So if it's something that's acoustic, say like a saxophone, you're probably better off just using microphones and starting from starting in the acoustic domain and entering straight through into a mic pre. But for anything that enters the analog domain before it's recorded, things like a DI box are a powerful way of not only getting the right signal level when you come in, but also splitting off for things like an amp. So something, say like you have like a classic keyboard in here. You got like a nice Rhodes sitting right in here. You might plug the Rhodes right into a preamp and get a real nice tone. You might also plug the Rhodes into a DI box, split that signal, because now we have an instrument level output right here, yeah? So we would come out from the instrument level output into a guitar amp, get a nice crunchy driven tone, blend that back in. Now we've got two separate tones to work with out of that one Rhodes, yeah? What's a Rhodes? What am I talking about here?
It's a Fender keyboard.
It's a Fender keyboard, exactly. It's a Fender keyboard. Yeah. Now, it's a Rhodes, Wurlitzer. These are examples of classic electric pianos is what they were called back in the day. Just think keys, and when you think of the Doors, that's all Rhodes and Wurlitzer and just the fun stuff. Okay, good. So that's a DI box. We talked about our three signal levels. You can use those principles to match up any signals in the entire studio and make them work one with the other. Once you have the right signal matchup, then you should have a good gain relationship with which to play the tone game. And the tone game just being driving inputs in order to create saturation at an amplifier. And that's the second big concept that I wanted to address today. The first one being just generally matching signals to get appropriate signal levels, which gets you part of the way there. It should get you in the realm of good relationships to where now you can start working with the saturation of any particular amplifier circuit. Okay, so I promise we're gonna get to some practical stuff here, and we'll stand up and we'll start walking around here in a second. I can already see the people fading here. I want to get through a little bit more theory, and I want to make sure that we hit this theory a little harder in general here so that you guys are a little bit better equipped from the theory standpoint to operate these systems. Because this concept, this level matching concept, getting the right levels here, 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 and here, will let you plug any piece of gear into anything in general. That's the only thing that is the mismatch. Either it needs power, in which case phantom power or batteries, or plug it in, and or it needs to have the right matchup of signal levels. So whether it's a keyboard or a guitar or whatever the hell it is, thing that I'm not even thinking of right now, you should be able to record it with nothing more than either microphone skills or DI box skills. You should be good to go. If anyone can think of exotic examples of things that wouldn't fall into one of those disciplines, please feel free to hit the comments, talk to Waterboy, yell them at me. If you can think of an example of one of these things, you also put in your comment something you want me to say. I will say literally anything if you can get this right. So beyond that, the next level, once you've got a matchup that makes sense to you, the next thing is working with the saturation. So this goes for any kind of tracking. We're talking today specifically about overdubs because we want to be thinking about instruments beyond the original sort of tracking session that we do. But this concept goes for every time you have any signal going through any signal path. We're talking about gain structure and saturation. So what is gain structure? Anybody? Wrong. Gain structure is the way that each point of addition or subtraction of level influences the next point of addition or subtraction of level, and how that influences the final level of your signal as played out in your final summing. So in the case of, say, just a microphone plugged into a preamp, we have the level of the, let's think about that gain structure. Gain structure is the, each point within the gain structure we would talk about as gain stages. So what's the first gain stage in your standard microphone to preamp to conversion signal chain? First gain stage. The first place where the level can be increased or decreased to change the sound. Preamp. So not the microphone? Might not the microphone have a pad on it?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so the microphone? Why not the source? If I'm the source, can't I sing louder or sing quieter? So my point being that most signal chains are a little more complex than we like to think about them, like to think in the first place. It's very tempting to think about gain staging as purely places where we have knobs, right? And that was where our thinking started. Like obviously it was, okay, well, what are the places where we can add or subtract gain? What are the first places where, the first place you're gonna see the word gain is on that preamp, right? Input gain, yeah? But the microphone probably has a pad on it, and that pad will affect the level that you hit the front stage of that preamp. So your range of potential sounds is a different range of potential sounds whether you use that pad or not. So this is one of the things I want to get you guys thinking about, whether it's a DI box that has a pad on it. And what do I mean by a pad? What's a pad?
It buffers the decibel level.
Yeah. A pad is almost always attenuation. It's very, well, a pad is always attenuation. A pad is some level, in this case, in the case of this DI box, it's 15 dB. It's a 15 dB pad. That would just subtract 15 dB from the signal. Most pads attempt to do so using a circuit that will affect the tone in the smallest way possible. But anyone who has done this at a high level will tell you that every change in gain and every attendant change in impedance creates some kind of change in tone. So if you want to get really micro with any of this, you can get a different tone out of your guitar simply by using the pad, turning the amp up. And whether you're compensating, whether your end result is the same level or not, you'll notice that those are two slightly different sounds, depending on where you add or subtract that gain. So too, the level that you're singing at. If it's a loud vocal, that's going to hit the microphone in a very different way from a quiet vocal. So this is one of the main reasons when we talk about sort of mic choice in any particular category, we want to consider the source, and we want to consider the source big time. If someone asked me like, what's the best mic for a rap vocal? You know, my hands go up in the air and I go, oh, I don't know what rap vocal, right? So what I could do is I could do some kind of averaging scenario in my brain. I could think about all the rap sessions I've done. Think about all of the ones that were sort of outliers, like that one's weird, throw all of those out. And of all the ones that don't appear weird in my brain, I could probably tell you the mic I've used the most commonly is a TLM 103. And I think when people say that, some people make statements like, oh, the 103 is really great for rap vocals, I think that's what they mean. In general, that is what's meant by the statement, that's good for this, is good for this is good for that, is that removing outliers and then averaging the middle, this is the thing that makes the most sense. That said, what that really means is this is going to ruin the smallest number of these sources. Baked into that statement is this is going to ruin some of them. And it's not the thing that's going to make your thing the best. Right? So this is why having a deep mic locker can make a big difference, because it lets you choose from a great range. It lets you say on this day, okay, even though this vocal sounded great on this song with this mic, this song is a much softer song. They're singing a lot quieter, which really changes the way your capsule reacts to the incoming air pressure. So maybe you want a different capsule that reacts differently to that incoming air pressure. All of these are gain stages. When viewed reductively, all of these are tonal controls, all of these are potential places where you can control your tone when viewed expansively. Okay, so at a basic level, each of these points gives you different levels of ability to affect your source based on the signal level you send it. Of course, a lot of other things are dependent, or there are a lot of other variables at play, but thinking about signal level first is probably a great way to start. So we thought about the source, we thought about the microphone as our first two stages of gain. And in general, what you want to just think about doing is matching up the microphone to the source. Maybe trying a few different ones, making sure that you don't have an obvious mismatch. Something like a small diaphragm condenser close up to a rock and roll snare that somebody's just smashing on is just going to distort. And if that's a ribbon mic you put up there, it's just going to break. So there are some pretty obvious mismatches. You don't want to blow up the microphone, and you don't want something that just gives you a signal you can't use. But outside of those mismatches, you want to think about, how can I alter the sound by using a different microphone? Maybe try a few, see what works out, and eventually you develop sort of a library in your brain of what each one sounds like. So moving along, preamp, gain staging. This is the point where I really want to spend some time today. Saturation versus non-saturation. So let's quickly talk about saturation. What is saturation?
How much water so I can hold?
Sure. Okay, how much water? But when you say it's saturated, what does that mean?
How much you can contain before it's maxed out?
Well, what happens when it's maxed out and I keep adding it? Just going to keep adding it, Wade. More water, more water, more water. It will lose some. Somehow it will lose some, right? Either that, or in the case of liquid dynamics that you're talking about, pressure maybe will increase. So we could think about it as increased pressure. We could think about it as loss. It is actually both things in the case of electrical dynamics. Electricity, in a very reductive, trying to get through it sense, is a system of conductive molecules, each of which have a certain number of electrons. If the atoms that have electrons on the outer ring that are looser than others are called valence electrons, or electrons on the outer ring in general are called valence electrons. Materials that have loose valence electrons are called conductive materials because those electrons can get knocked off and then reattached to other atoms of that same kind of conductive material. So if we're talking copper, it just has this loose electron on the outside of it that if you just hit it with another copper molecule, atom, copper is an element, so an atom is a molecule at that point. You just hit it with another copper atom, that electron can get added to this one, which gives it an extra electron, and so it'll knock that electron off and give it up to the next one that doesn't have one. So in that way, electrons can be conducted through a copper medium. So the capacity of each particular metal to pass more and more electrons, or circuit, depending on what combinations of metal you've got in your circuit and in what arrangements. Each circuit will have its own capacity to pass a certain number of electrons smoothly, and if we simply add too many electrons for it to pass them in a one-to-one way, so I put 1 in, I got 1 out. Put 2 in, I got 2 out. Put 6 in, I got 6 out. I put 7 in, I got 6.8 out, right? And then I put 8 in, and I got 6.9 out. And then I put 11 in, and I got 6.96 out, right? And so what you get is this increasing rate of diminishing returns. So what it looks like is an exponential curve where you keep getting less and less out the more you put in. And so you get to a point where you can just put in almost infinite energy into the front and get back almost no additional signal in return. Instead, what you get is distortion. So that loss or that pressure on the electrical system, however you want to think of it, results in saturation, distortion, eventually what we'd call clipping. These are all different shades of the same thing. So saturation is generally what we call it when it is affecting the signal in a positive way to the original signal. So the original signal is intact, snare drum still sounds like a snare drum, but now it sounds like a nice, warm, saturated snare drum. That's saturation. As soon as we start hearing the crunch, and the crunch becomes an audible component of the sound, and it's snare drum plus crunch, that's when we'd start calling it distortion. And so that'd be a distorted snare drum, right? So we hear distortion, distortion. As soon as the distortion overwhelms the original signal in a way that makes the original signal unusable, and again, this is a subjective reality, it's a subjective terminology, we would start to call that clipping. So too much distortion is clipping, audible distortion or audible saturative artifacts is distortion, just increased saturative sound, which is different depending on what circuit you've got it going through, is what we'd call saturation. So your ability to use that concept, both in initial tracking and in overdubbing, can be a pretty big deal. So these concepts, that saturation concept, can play out in microphones. Microphones tend to be very kind of all or nothing. You tend to hit that exponential wall really, really early, where you've kind of got like clean signal, and then clipped, like all of a sudden, is what you'll generally experience from most microphones. Preamps, on the other hand, operate at a much higher voltage. In general, that's what we consider, when we consider these circuits, higher voltage circuits have what we call a wider operating range, which means we can get more saturation. We can have these more useful varying degrees of saturation before we get into clipping. So one of the things we'll be working with today is input gain and saturation. The way we're going to affect that is just by turning input gain up on these amplifiers until we start to get some saturation, and we'll talk about those different places. Cool? So questions so far? Wade.
Is it possible in a way to, I guess, have both saturation and distortion depending on what kind of engineering wizardry you work on?
Well, okay, so the question is it possible to have both saturation and distortion? I'm going to give you the complicated answer, which is you could split the signal and have any array of parallel or simultaneous effects going on and then blend between them in any way you wanted. So if we had 5 different versions of the signal, we could have 5 levels of saturation ranging from nothing all the way up to clipping and just blend to taste. The other more subjective answer is that really, again, these are subjective terms. And so the usefulness of a term like distortion versus saturation is for you to describe to another engineer the sound you want, or for a client to describe to you the sound that they want, or where you're at in relationship to what you want. So I suppose one could imagine a situation where something was just on the line of saturation and maybe there was a little distortion audible, but what is distortion to me it is not a black and white line. I shouldn't expect it to be the same black and white line for you. So we should consider these ranges and maybe ranges that overlap a little bit in order for us to, does that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah.
Cool. Other questions? So you guys are all hip with the 3 levels of signal, mic, instrument, and line, and how they work. Because we're now going to dive into an example. All right, so here's the example. We're going to set up a Pro Tools session. Software, engage. Hey Google, start Pro Tools. No? Nobody? Never mind then. Give it a year. That joke is going to kill.
Hey Alexa, start.
No, because you don't say Hey Alexa, do you?
I don't.
You say Alexa. Do you say Alexa?
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't have Alexa. I've got the Google Assistant.
I just know the funny internet videos that make fun of it. That's all I know about it.
Oh, still? All right, so we'll do a restart here, and we will set up the analog side of this first. All right. It's not going to screw you up if I restart over here, is it, Waterboy?
Probably not.
I love that confidence. All right. I'm doing a hard kill, Waterboy. Full death. You okay with that? Yeah. Okay. Good. Sweet. All right, so analog side of this. The challenge, we have a guitar amp set up in the booth, yeah? And the challenge that we have is to set up a situation where we can have somebody playing in here, listening to the monitors, listening to the same feedback that we, the producer and engineer, are hearing, and record their tone coming out of that amp. So we've got a few challenges here. One is that we need to get the signal through into the amplifier, which is in the other room. And the way we're going to do that is by running through the patch bay. So would somebody go grab a J48? No, we have a J48. Somebody grab a DI, the Whirlwind DI, the Director. You're closest. Thanks, Tyler. Let's grab 2 of those and a couple of guitar cables. Thank you. So our challenge again, we need to get from this guitar. We're going to go through the patch bay, and don't sit on the desk. Don't ever sit on the desk. Sitting on the desk is very bad. We're going to go through the patch bay and out to the amplifier. So one of the things that I want to make sure we bake into this particular conversation is, in this studio, how are things wired up and how do we make these connections happen? So in this case, we've got a guitar. Hunter, you going to play the guitar?
Sure.
Thanks, buddy. Why don't you come grab this guitar and get a nice comfy seat. Were you playing basketball today?
What? No.
You look like you maybe were playing basketball today.
Because I'm tall?
Yep. That was it. That was it. It was the tall and the shorts.
And the...
If you were shorter, I would have asked if you were playing soccer. Okay. Cool. So, guitar. What level do we expect the guitar to put out?
Instrument.
Instrument level, yes. Guitar is your classic instrument level output. And what's our destination? Where are we trying to get with this signal?
Line?
Well, so yeah, in a certain sense, we are trying to get to line because we do need to record it. So one could imagine that any particular signal scenario needs to get to line at some point. But along the way, we're going to need to be instrument level to get to the amp, right? So we need an instrument level signal to go to the amplifier. And then we need a mic level signal to go to a microphone preamp. And then we're going to need the microphone preamp to output that line level signal that we talked about to convert analog to digital. Yeah. This guy, this is a speaker cable. Yeah. Speaker cable. Let's talk about speaker cable for a second, because this is a kind of a mysterious thing, and this is part of this conversation, yeah? So what is a speaker cable?
A cable for speakers.
Oh, Wade. Opportunistic. Easy points. Yes, you're right. It's a cable for speakers. So we haven't talked about speaker level. Speaker level is on the other side of the whole universe from us. And that is the level that amplifiers, power amplifiers, send to speakers. It's much higher voltage, like much higher voltage than any of the signal levels we've talked about so far. So it has very different cabling needs than any of the signal levels we've talked about. So a speaker cable, if you bust this open, is much hardier inside. It's just got much thicker, much higher gauge hot wire. And less insulation. We're not so worried about signal to noise ratio because the voltage, again, the signal level carried through this is very high. Compared to any background interference, it's just not going to be a problem. So in general, if we use this as an instrument cable, what might we expect? A lot of noise. Yes. So generally speaking, speaker cables used as instrument cables will be very noisy. Also, and that's the problem with using speaker cables as instrument cables. They may carry the signal just fine, but they're not really shielded very well, and so they're generally speaking going to be noisy buggers. What about the opposite way around? What if we used an instrument cable as a speaker cable? Signal would not be as hot. We might get a lot more loss, right? Because it's a much smaller conductive medium. Also, it will over time degrade the conductivity of the cable itself, because that high voltage will fuse those copper atoms together, and it will just be not so great. So don't quote me on the fusing the atoms thing. I hope over time for the comments section on these videos to develop to the point where you guys will just rake me over the coals for saying shit like that. Frankly, if anybody here was even remotely smart, I would get called out 10 times a night. So please. And Dave Pensado, I love you, man. Really, I really do. Okay, so looking at all of this, yes. Long story short, just don't use either one as either one. You can get away using an instrument cable as a speaker cable in a real absolute pinch. Use a shitty instrument cable because you shouldn't trust that it's as good an instrument cable after you use it as a speaker cable. But that speaker level, much higher voltage, it's on the whole other side of the world from us, and that is post amplifier. We don't even deal with it in the studio because in general we have powered monitors. So the fact that these monitors have built-in amplifiers, that speaker level signal only ever goes from the inside of that monitor to another place inside that monitor. We're sending line level out to the powered monitor, right? So the fact that these monitors have the amplifiers built in means that we don't really ever deal with speaker level in the studio. Unless we've got a guitar amp that requires a speaker plug-in, in which case, speaker level. And that's why we have that speaker cable. Okay, instrument cables, great. So let's talk about balanced versus unbalanced cabling, because now what we're trying to do is get this signal out to the amplifier, yeah? So, someone explain to me about balanced versus unbalanced cabling. Anybody? Wrong. Balanced and unbalanced differ in the simple fact that a balanced cable has a third connection. So a traditional electronics connection is hot and ground. It's a real simple concept. It's just an in and an out. Think about your fluid dynamics analogy. If this is water, you need somewhere for the water to come in and a place for the water to go out, and then you're good, right? So that's hot and ground. Water flows in the hot and then has to go out the ground. Now, electricity is a little more complicated than that in that your ground is a place, literally the ground. The electricity is seeking or those electrons are seeking the object of highest mass, which is the core of the planet Earth, the magnetic center of this thing that we're on. So within this electromagnetic field, all valence electrons flow towards the magnetic center of the Earth. All signals are destined to eventually get there. That's where they all end up. Through the ground wires on your house, hopefully, and not through your hands and your feet and all that jazz. But that's what the hot and the ground mean in any of these electronics connections. You have the hot where the electrons come in and the ground where they go out to eventually seek the magnetic center of the universe. They don't ever get farther than the Earth, but they are seeking the magnetic center of the universe. A balanced connection, so again, unbalanced connections, standard instrument connections, hot, so we have the tip and then the ring. These are the two connection points. One, hot, the tip is always hot, the ring is always ground. This is just the way it is. Get that hot tip, ring ground, right? You got to remember it. You guys got to remember it. Hot tip. Remember that hot tip. You got to get that hot tip. Let me grab a TRS cable. Aha! Good. This is the best one. Okay, so this is an example of a balanced cable. This is the same 1/4-inch connection in a balanced configuration. Tip, ring, sleeve. Yes, hot tip, cold ring, ground sleeve. Right? Okay, so sleeve is always ground, the tip is always hot, and then you've got this cold ring in the middle. So cold is a new concept. We talked about the fact that the electrical circuit needs the hot and the ground in order for the electrons to flow in and then out. If they can't flow out, they won't flow in. Enough said, yeah? Okay, so hot and ground always necessary. So what's this cold about? Someone want to unpack the cold for me?
The phase flips the signal and then reconverts it back so you don't get any noise from the length of the cable.
Oh, you're so close. So The only problem with that is that it takes specifically not the signal, everything but the signal. So the cold runs the same length, the same connections, right? But does not connect to the hot. So what you have is the hot, which carries the signal, the electrons, right? The increasing and decreasing modulated electrical current flows to ground, so the ground is the destination. Now the cold runs along the exact same distance without making connection to the hot on the other end. So what does that give us? That gives us exactly what that gives us anything that the hot picks up along the way, being interference, being noise. So noise is another one of these subjective terms. The term noise is a lot like the term weeds. Noise is just any unwanted signal. So who knows what really is and isn't noise, but things that generally get considered noise would be radio frequency interference, or called RFI. EMI, electromagnetic interference, which would be just electrons coming in from other electromagnetic sources. So like these lights are blasting us with heat energy. That heat energy has electromagnetic action to it, which affects the electrons on the circuit, right? So the fact that that light is on will create some change in the signal over the length of transmission, yeah? So all of those changes are in the...
Can you put both those
Yeah, yeah, totally. So we're talking here unbalanced. Unbalanced and balanced. So in this case, we have tip, hot tip. We have cold ring and ground sleeve. And in this case, we have hot tip and ground sleeve. Huh? Yeah?
lower it a little? There you go.
How's that, water boy?
Don't sit on the desk.
Oh, don't sit on the desk. Don't sit on the desk. All right. Really though, don't sit on the desk. I'm so stupid. All right, so the cold in a balanced connection is simply runs the same length, picks up all the same interference, all the same noise, right? And then, but doesn't have the signal on it. And so we combine that with the signal at the end and we phase flip it. And so what happens? We cancel the noise. It's actually kind of brilliant in its elegance. So by running the same wire twice and then phase flipping one, but only connecting one to the hot signal, we've essentially used the other one as a way of just eliminating everything that wasn't the original hot signal. Yeah? So balanced cabling is really simple, but actually pretty profound in its audio implications. Because here we are in the analog domain, taking one electrical signal, adding another electrical signal to it. We're just adding the noise again, but phase inverted and thusly canceling noise. So it's not perfect. Balanced runs tend to start picking up audible noise after about 100 feet of length. So the general wisdom is you can run balanced connections up to about 100 feet without rebuffering, sort of without adding some more signal strength back into it. Unbalanced connections, 30 feet kind of at max, but even that's pushing it. In general, I think with an unbalanced connection, the smart way to think about it is the shortest connection possible. So if all you've got is that hot tip and that ground, then what you're looking to do is minimize the amount of balanced connection or unbalanced connection, minimize the amount of unbalanced connection in your signal chain. So if you're a guitarist, the shortest cable length is always the best cable length. And I don't care whether one is Mogami and one is like just some mid-level garbage you got at Guitar Center. If one of them's 20 feet long and the other one is 6 feet long, that 6-foot cable is going to beat that 20-foot cable every day of the week, just because it picks up that much less noise. It has that much less signal loss. It will incur that much less capacitance. So I don't want to get into capacitance in too high a degree. Suffice it to say that with any balanced connection, unless it's buffered, you lose a lot for every foot that you travel. So we want to minimize that. So these are very long cables, and I appreciate that you got me very long cables. It's very considerate of you. You got me a lot of cable. Thank you. But we probably want the shortest cables possible for this particular connection. So why don't we send Wade, go find me the shortest guitar cables you can find me on the wall.
Ooh, all right.
Good. So the other connection type that we have for balanced connection, while we're here, let's just do this. Let's just be thorough. I know you've got Brad coming in next week to do all kinds of like miking things up and all the sexy stuff, because that's what he'll want to do. So I'm going to do all the unsexy cable stuff, yeah? This is an XLR cable. This is what we call the male side, hopefully for obvious reasons, although as I said earlier, I will answer any question.
Show it to the camera.
Cool. Male XLR, this has our standard 3-pin. Anybody know what the standard configuration is? It gets a little confusing with XLR because you invert for the left, for the male and female. But in this case, it would be hot, ground, cold. And it would be inverted for the female side. Hot, ground, cold. This is what we call 1, 2, 3. This is pin 2, 3, 1. That comes into play if you're ever rewiring cables or making, soldering stuff, whatever. But for you guys just running XLR, just knowing it's balanced and knowing that it's got a hot wire, a ground wire, and then that cold wire that phase flips the noise, good enough for me. Cool. Okay, so we're going to run through the wall using a DI box. So this is where it gets a little bit complicated. We're going to take this first DI box, and we're going to use this to split the signal, both for our amplifier side and for our preamp side. So I like to match active DI boxes in general with passive input signals. So the guitar being a passive input signal, which means what?
It's not powered.
It's not powered, right. So say this guitar had like,
I forgot where they were because I'm dumb.
surprising.
I'll just show them.
All right. First thing being guitar cables.
Stupid idiot, Wade.
I am.
God. By the way, if you just show me even a little bit of trepidation, that's what you get. I'm going to send you on these missions and yell at you that you're a stupid idiot. Okay, so we're looking at this passive versus active input source. I know I'm throwing a ton of terminology at you guys, and especially if you're brand new, you're just like, oh, trust me, it's going to wash over you. You're going to catch it next time. For some of you guys who've been around a little bit, hopefully this is solidifying things in a way that makes it practical and usable. So passive input source. The guitar is a passive input source. You might encounter some guitars that say have a 9-volt battery in them. That would indicate there's a little preamp built into the guitar. That's an active input source. In most cases, you're going to have to either pad an active DI box or switch to a passive in order to get your signal matched up right. Otherwise, you'll probably be clipping the DI box. This is one of the most common ways that even experienced engineers get kerflummoxed. Look that one up. Kerflummoxed by their tech. You plug an active input into this, like a guitar with a preamp in it, and no matter what you do on this DI box, you pad it, you turn your preamp down, no matter what you do, you're going to get some crunch and some fuzz because you're clipping the input stage, the mic level or the instrument level stage of this DI box. So that clipping is just in there. So in that case, what you need to do is switch to a passive DI box. And in general, the purpose of an active DI is to match up with a passive input. Cool. So let's take our passive input. Good, and let's plug him right in there. Next thing we need to do is plug into a microphone preamp. So we've got a couple of options. We could take a standard XLR cable right out of the back of our J48. Yep, standard XLR, and plug that right into the snake just like we would any other microphone. In this case, we're trying to go right into a mic pre. So I'm going to go use this XLR to TT cable. You guys see the TT cable? Same concept, tip ring sleeve, hot tip, cold sleeve, cold ring, sorry. Cold ring, the ring is cold, the sleeve is ground.
What if we have another ring?
What, like tip ring sleeve? Mm-hmm. Then you've got some kind of really weird configuration. What do you have one of those for?
For a microphone, for like earbuds.
Oh, yeah, yeah, like the Apple. Okay, so what is that? But what does that add? In that case, it's not even really a balanced connection. What you're doing is you're taking 2 stereo and a microphone out of the same place, right? So in that case, really what you have is just 3 signals, 3 signals and a ground. So you have left, right, the left earbud, right earbud, microphone, and ground. That's what those 4 connection points on your, great question, because we all do actually see those all the time. Not so much since Apple did away with the, with the cord, but you still see them maybe plugging them into your adapter. But those 4 space, the tip, ring, sleeve, exactly, are left, right, microphone, and ground. Great question.
That's the one ring to rule them all.
Yeah. Well, no, it's 2 rings. It's the one tip to rule them all. Yes. Jeez. All right. So I've got my TT cable. TT stands for what?
Tiny telephone.
Tiny telephone. Yes, exactly. These are the types of jacks that they used to use in telephone switching. So you'd call them up and you'd be like, connect me now, and then they'd be like, oh, and they just connect you, you know. And that's the whole thing they would do, the telephone, right? So that we're still using these here because they're nice and tiny. Really, we could be using 3.5. These just tend to be more durable. They have nice switches. They're made to last forever. That's why patch bays are still using these TT cables. Tested and true. So I'm going to take my connection point from here. So, and anyone who wants to get up close and get a look at this, whether you're online and you want to look at the upstairs camera, or whether you're here in the room and you want to get all up in here and just see what's going on, please do. I would much rather you get up in my business than you look at me with blank stares later when I ask you about this stuff. So plugging into a preamp. So the preamp we're going to choose is going to be the preamp that we're going to select to capture our direct sound, our sound right out of the guitar. I'm going to use Vintech 1 for no reason other than the Vintech is a nice Neve 1073 model and will never sound bad on anything ever in the universe. Cool. That's another one. If you guys find a source that sounds bad through a 1073, let me know in the comments section. I would love to encounter such a source. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the output from this guy, and we're going to plug it in the through, and the through is going to plug into our second DI box. That second DI box is going to plug into the patch bay using the same kind of connection as the first one. XLR to TT. And in this one, I'm going to plug into a patch bay connection that will let me get to the snake closest to the guitar amplifier. In this case, the snake closest to the guitar amplifier is in ISO booth A. I'm going to plug into ISO booth A1. And then let's walk into ISO booth A and take a look at what we've got going on in here. All right. So ISO booth A. Welcome to ISO booth A for you new guys. This is our guitar amplifier. This is the guy that's going to be making the noise. We've got a couple of microphones that we're going to be using to capture the amplified signal. In this case, I'm using my DI box in reverse. Waterboy, if I get down here, am I in the frame? Is this good?
Nope.
Nope. What should I do?
Just talk.
Yeah.
Just talk? Okay. Just speaking. Okay, so we're going to use our DI box here, this director, Whirlwind director, passive DI box, in order to get our signal out of the ISO booth connection point. So I'm going to take one down here, and I'm going to plug that into, I'm going to take my XLR, plug it into ISO booth 1, plug the other end into the back of my director, and in this case, I'm basically using this guy in reverse. and I'm going to break a rule here. Oh, no, we've already got a cable. Great. That's wonderful. It's super nice. Thank you, Waterboy. I had meant to. Okay. It is generally considered bad form to put a DI box, being something that has a transformer inside of it, on top of an amplifier, which has a heavy magnet. In general, it's considered gospel that will affect the signal coming out of one or the other. In practice, I've really never observed this to be the case. I put a lot of DI boxes on a lot of amplifiers, and not until I was yelled at a few times did I stop doing it. My best advice is do it so you don't get yelled at by live sound guys. Really, if we can all get through life being yelled at by live sound guys, just a little less. Not none, because that is impossible, but just a little less yelled at by live sound guys, that'd be really great. Okay, so we're going instrument side, flat, no filter, ground lift up, good. So basically we're using this DI box in reverse to take our signal from the snake box.
Do you
Connect.
have to hit anything on the box to?
Nope,
reverse
nope.
flow?
Standard connection. Because remember, this is unlike fluid dynamics. This goes both ways. These electrons, depending on which way you push them, like really, we're pushing electrons this way. We could easily push electrons that way and just be just fine.
Okay.
Cool. Oh, I'm sorry, Waterboy. Yeah, you totally asked me if I was going to do this, and I was like, nope, not going to do that, and now I'm doing it to you.
Yep. As you do.
Did anyone get sick from that? Is anyone watching through that camera?
No.
Okay.
They're about to get sick, though. I'm about to put Jet on.
Sick burn.
There you go.
I know, I just got wrecked. Just demolished. Waterboy!
You hit my camera. Don't
Oh,
hit my
but
camera.
Waterboy, I don't want it. Okay, so director DI box. XLR signal comes in down in the ground there. It's plugged into, the XLR is plugged into ISO booth A channel 1. Right here. Yes, ISO booth A channel 1. That XLR connects to the output, the thing labeled output on our director box. As we're going to notice, this thing labeled output really can just go both ways. To call this output is a bit of a misnomer in this case. This is the input. Going to come out of the input, 1/4 inch cable, into the orange amp, which we should turn on and get ready. So I'm going to turn that on standby, get that all powered up. Cool. Standard settings, everything flat here, no ground lift, no pad, and no filter. Cool. Back to the control room. Thank you, Waterboy. Thank you, Waterboy. Thank you, Waterboy.
That's terrifying.
Thank you, Waterboy.
It actually replaces like what you're doing.
Okay. So first thing we want to do is confirm our signal here at the J48 and turn on phantom power. Without phantom power, this guy won't send our signal through to the director, or I should say it will send our signal through to the director, but it will not receive signal at the preamp for our clean DI. So I want to get a little specific to guitar. So far, we've been kind of in general with all this stuff. And I want to get a little specific to guitar and say that when you record guitars, get that clean DI. Always get that clean DI. Yeah? Yeah? Get that clean DI, right? Get that clean DI. Yes. Yes. God. Jesus. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open something from past stuff. Let's see what we've got. Maybe. Cool. Some drums from last week. Good. Oh, yeah. You guys might not be impressed if you saw this drum kit, though. Let me tell you. get that dungeon kit. All right, so I'm just gonna duplicate this a whole bunch. I'm gonna make a big old loop out of this also. Nice. That's not good.
How did you loop it?
Loop. So the loop functionality in Pro Tools is Option Command L. What I'm going to do is select an exact measure. So I've got exactly measure 1 to exactly measure 2 using the grid cursor. Boom, exactly measure 1, exactly measure 2. Command E to make sure I'm separated on the beginning and the end. Option Command G to clip group. And then Option Command L to loop this section. Clip looping, it's going to give me any number. 8 is fine. It's going to allow me to crossfade if I want. In this case, they're just blending in silence, so I don't need it. Click OK. Gives me 8 loops, but then I can just drag this loop out to be any length I want.
Is clip group different than consolidating?
It is. So great question. Let's go back to our original clip here. So right here I have the option of either clip grouping. Clip grouping will make these all temporarily one clip. So if I move them around, they all act like one clip, but I can always ungroup them in order to get back to their component pieces, right? Option Command U will ungroup. Another option I have here would be to consolidate, Shift Option 3. Now there's two big differences here. Consolidate creates 2 separate audio files, and it makes it so that these don't ungroup. I would have to undo. So if I hypothetically closed this session and then reopened it and cleared my undo clipboard, I wouldn't be able to ungroup these clips if I'd consolidated. So, and also, again, consolidation would create 2 audio clips, right? Because it's just track by track. Each one of these is its own audio unit. Whereas clip grouping groups these clips together track to track. Yeah? And also in a way that I can undo. Cool. So there we go, blah, blah, blah. Lots of grouping. Cool, that's our drum beat. Muy bueno. So now I'm going to add to this guy one mono audio track. I'm going to hit record enable, and I'm going to set this to lav 1 to record from the Vintech. I'm going to call this EG1DI. I'm going to make the track purple because obviously everybody knows that guitars are purple.
I thought effects were purple.
Guitars are purple. That is all. End of discussion. Thank you. I'm going to send on the preamp again. Anyone who wants to crowd in and see exactly what's going on here, much rather that than have you look at me confused later on. I'm going to send 48 volts of phantom power by turning on the plus 48V phantom power switch here on the preamp.
Could I get the sphere?
Huh?
This needs to be tuned. A sphere for the tuning.
You would like to tune?
Yes.
All right.
That would be nice.
I'm going to show you a pro tip. I prefer Intune.
Intune.
Intune is pretty awesome.
Intune's good. And who's that by?
This is my favorite tuner. Just use it.
Okay. I can't see it.
Okay. So while he tunes that guitar, we're going to talk about signal levels for a DI. And for any signal that you record into the box, negative 15 dBFS is a safe place to peak your signals. We're in 24 bits. That's plenty of bits. You're using plenty of bits there. Don't believe the people that tell you need to get more bits than that. That's ridiculous. 15 dBFS is where you should be looking to peak your signals. Basically, you want to track everything in the dark green. If your tall peaks on a dynamic signal jump up into the light green a little bit, i.e. hitting up to negative 15, then you're in good shape. Yeah? Cool. So take that. Ooh, see, guitar signals are super dynamic. So go ahead and give me some chunky power chords. So that's the thing I want jumping up into the light green. And in general, that's going to mean most of his playing will be way down in the dark green. That's what we want from a guitar DI. Keep those low, keep those in the low dynamic range because they're going to be very, very dynamic signals. They're going to be a wide range from quiet to loud on their input. So this clean DI comes right out of the guitar. Record this every time. This is your most important signal. You can take this signal, if you get it nice and clean, send it back out to any amplifier you want, any amp you could possibly imagine, or any amp in the box, any plug-in, and get any range of guitar tones you possibly could imagine for this sound. If you don't get this clean DI, you're stuck with whatever the hell you recorded, which best case scenario is the right thing, but you can't add anything to it. Worst case scenario, common scenario, it's not quite everything you'd want from it, and you're kind of stuck with it. So get that clean DI. You do that by plugging directly into a DI box, plugging that DI box directly into a preamplifier, in this case passive source. We're using an active DI box, plugging it into the Vintech, using a low input level signal. Okay, so we could saturate this quite a bit, and let's talk about saturation here a little bit. So if I want to take my input level way down and take this up, go ahead and give me some plan. Saturation. Same signal level, not saturated. So you'll notice that with saturation, we got some dynamic control. Saturation equals compression. Compression is a byproduct of saturation necessarily. Remember, we talked about losing some signal, losing more and more signal. The more you feed in, you get less out. That's compression, yeah? That is what we do with compression. Okay, so in general, you don't want to saturate this signal much because you want this to be clean to allow an amplifier to saturate it. So go ahead and give me that hot level again. Cool, that's a good DI signal. Now I'm going to pull this down and we're going to start looking at that amplifier. So I'm going to go into the other room, turn the amplifier on and look at that amp signal. Go ahead and play me some. All right, you gonna play me some Radiohead?
Yep.
I kind of figured. All right, so go ahead and play me that. Loop, loop, loop. All right, so I'm gonna leave the sexy stuff again for Brad. Suffice my part of this to say that setting a good sound on your amplifier is the most important thing you can possibly do. Aside from getting your clean DI, that's the most important thing. Get that clean DI always. But then after that, the signal you record, work on the source first. Always work on the source first. Like how well you mic it and how well you use your preamps, how well you do compression and EQ and all the fancy stuff you do later is how much frosting can you put on this cake. Like the thing is the source. Get the source as close to what you want as you possibly can. So stand in front of the amplifier, get that meaty tone, work with the settings, play the input gain off the output gain, and we'll have a whole seminar on guitar tones coming up soon. Guitar tones, this is my thing. We'll have a whole seminar on just getting great guitar tones. However, we're going to take that for granted. We've got a good guitar tone. Now it's just recording that guitar tone. I'm going to create another mono audio track. And this one just takes my mic input. So this guy, I have a mic connected to ISO booth A, channel 2, and I'm going to connect that input to Vintech 2. Woo, yeah! You should probably not have that record enabled when you plug things in. That's called hot plugging, and it's very bad. You want to not do that.
Why?
Well, because you're just popping things. You're just going to blow up speakers and blow up people's ears, and it's just, generally speaking, not a good thing. It's not the end of the world, but it's not great, and I don't love that I'm doing it in front of you. Okay, cool. EG1DI, I'm going to call this EG1. Yep, 87, because this is going to be our U87 track. This is a U87 out on the edge of the cone. We'll see how that sounds through this Vintech 48. Okay, Phantom power's on. Great. I hot plugged the Phantom too. So go ahead and give me some play. Cool, cool. Let's take that again from the top and then just not like an asshole. I am not so subtly suggesting that he tune.
Yeah.
So
when it stops moving is when it's in tune?
Yeah, exactly. And that's like push. You kind of get it figured out. And it's a little weird at first, but this is my favorite tuning plugin after you get it figured out. I find it to be the most sort of effective and fluid to use.
How old are these strings, Waterboy?
Too old. Too new would be bad too, but too old.
I can hear the rust on them.
You can hear the rust on your face. Cool.
Still just sounds.
Yeah. And you're trying to play open chords too, so you're at the mercy. You're at all the mercy. So tune to that open chord. Play that open chord. Steady. All right. E, A, D, G. Cool. Cool. Try it again. Hold the chord. Cool. That'll work. That'll work for now. All right. Good. And then this is the 57. We'll do that in a sec. Good. So keep playing. So this is a U87 out on the edge of the speaker cone. I don't love it. Just off the bat. Let's try saturating it though. So this is unsaturated. This is as little saturation as we can get. Back to the E. More grip, maybe meet him halfway. Cool. We'll go with that. The 87, the 57, I think will dial this in a lot better. Again, the purpose of today is not getting sexy guitar tones. We will have a whole other seminar on that. So much as getting these signal levels matched up, right? So in this guy, I'm going to take Lav 3, turn my levels down here, turn off record enable across the board. Patch in from Isobooth 3 into Vintech 3. Turn that down and go ahead. So if I want to change the sound of this guitar, I'm much better off going in and changing the tones on the amp. Play it. Go again. Go. Keep going. So again, the purpose of this not demonstrating great guitar tone, but demonstrating how much we can change it just by walking in there and changing the amp. No amount of that control exists here on the preamps. But we do have control over saturation, so go ahead and play. So that's very little saturation. Let's see if we can saturate a little bit. So that in particular, it was a lot thinner before we saturated, right? So we're adding a lot of harmonic thickness as we saturate through a 1073. Okay, so that's our demonstration in achieving guitar sounds and signal levels. Thank you very much for hanging in there with me, guys. This is always kind of a tough one. It's one that I seek to bring in more diagrams as time goes on, bring in more sort of visuals. I want for this to be a more tactile thing, but trust me, this is the stuff that that makes an engineer. Your ability to work with these signal strengths, work with saturation, understand gain staging, and understand signal matchups. Because creating this circuit of moving electrons is the culmination of understanding each connection and each gain stage and each point and its effect on the overall situation. We could have a pretty dramatic effect on our input to our amplifier simply by using the pad here. The input to any of these saturative points, the input to any number of points beyond this. We start adding a distortion pedal. That adds a whole other layer of gain staging, right? So just understanding how they all work out is a big deal. So thank you for hanging in there for the slightly drier version of this. I'm, again, leaving the sexier version of this for Brad next week, where he will sort of pick up where I'm leaving off and just start getting good tones and good signals and impressing you guys with all sorts of guitar stuff. I don't know if he's going to do guitars so much as pianos or whatever his input, whatever he chooses to focus on. It will be much more sound-based next time than technical stuff. So, thank you at home. Thank you. And what do we have for questions in the comments? Just make them up if you need to. Just make them up, Waterboy. Just pretend.
Why do you look like that?
Like this? Yeah. Well, it's a look I've cultivated over many years. I used to be a lot heavier, and when I looked like Silent Bob. And so when that was the case, I kind of wore the hair down, and I had like a whole thing, and people used to just tell me I looked like Silent Bob. And then now it's this. So it's a little combination of like used to care about it, and now not so much. You know, this changes a lot. So thanks, Waterboy. Thanks. That's a good question. That's a good question. You know. I put clothes on in the morning because I have to come into this place. My mom makes my pants. That's usually a question that comes up.
I was going to ask that.
Yeah.
How do you get the...
Right. This is like the one fashion thing that I engage in. My mom makes my bell bottoms. That's pretty much all I wear. Sometimes I wear short shorts. My mom makes those also.
Does she wear them with you, or is it?
Well, at the same time, like, hey, let's go put on those short shorts and just no, that's not a thing. That would be really messed up. Or maybe awesome. I don't know. Maybe awesome. It's hard to say. Yeah.
Somebody's asking about specs on cables for speakers.
Really?
Andrew Polk.
Huh?
Andrew Polk.
Yeah, I was gonna.
Nice. So what was the question?
The speak on cables.
Yes, speak on cables.
You went through TRS.
Great question.
XLR.
Okay, speak on. Yes, great. Thank you, Internet, for that question. Right. And I encourage, please troll me. Please troll me in the comments. I would really love it if people would just tell me I'm fat. It would make me feel like I was being listened to. So the speak on cable. I don't think we have an example here in the studio because in the studio we tend not to use speak-on connections. Speak-on connections are live speaker connections used for larger format speakers. They are speaker level connections, and really all they are is fancy unbalanced connections. So they take the same concept that an XLR has. So you know how you plug in an XLR and you can't get that satisfying click because it has a little clasp that engages and holds the cable in place. Speak-on is the same way. So Speak-on looks a little bit like an XLR cable. And if you've got an example, maybe you could bring one in next seminar and show the class a Speak-on cable.
They're on order.
Are we gonna have a
Nice.
show and tell?
Yeah, so bring on those Speak-on cables. Speak-on cables are generally unbalanced, although you can get balanced Speak-on connections. And again, they're really just cables that make a solid connection point with a click and a clasp. Sometimes they'll have a turn, so you'll have an in and a turn, and then it's like that sucker's not coming out of there. You'll yank the speaker right off the wall before that. You know, you could swing off these things.
Does it require the speaker to have a certain?
Yeah, you have to have a Speak-on input. I know people who have built Speak-on connections into their guitars and then into their pedal boards so that they're unbreakable, so that you couldn't possibly pull your cable out. Like it's just like it's in there.
So you're just gonna rip half your guitar out?
Yeah.
Like these are not smart guys. These are guys who have run out of things to do on their guitar board. It's a,
Loop it through your
why not use an XLR? I don't know, but people have done this.
On speaker cables in general, is I guess I'm confused if it's like the output that's sending the signal that is really hot, or if it's the
Yes.
speaker that
Well, so the speaker demands a signal that is really hot.
has no amp in it?
Well, a passive speaker,
Yeah.
like your standard sort of PA scenario,
Yeah.
does not have an amplifier in it. And so that's just got a heavy magnet in it that requires very high voltage in order to drive the electromagnetic system and move the cone. Yeah? A power amp provides that voltage.
So does it not require a speaker cable?
So from a power amp to a speaker, to a passive speaker, that's the speaker connection. So the power amp outputs that high voltage speaker signal, and the speaker expects and connects to that high voltage speaker connection.
Isn't that all in the?
That's all up in our studio monitors. So our studio monitors have the power amps built inside them, and they send that speaker level signal inside themselves to the magnets.
Do you know what speaker level is? What voltage it is?
I don't know exactly what voltage
So
it
y'all
is.
are just using those are just balanced cables then?
To connect to the powered monitors,
Yeah.
yes, these are line level balanced cables. Now line level has a couple of different settings to it. There's generally consumer line level, which is what we'd call -10. That's a hotter line level used to connect like home stereo components. And then studio line level is what we call +4. That's a lower level signal. And that is generally what connects high quality studio gear among itself. So point being, there is some distinguishing between one line level and another depending on your component ecosystem. But in general, within an ecosystem, like within pro audio studio gear, it's all one line level. And yes, that is what we send from the converters to the speakers is line level.
So short speaker cables are only used on passive?
Well, yes. That you could say that. Speaker cables are only used from power amps to passive speakers. Yeah. Cool. Other questions?
Can you explain your hat?
This one, yes. Make America Bluth again. So they're doing another season of Arrested Development. This one is much more a full season. Last time it was kind of like a see how this works. Yeah, exactly. Like
we could only get this actor for 2 episodes.
right. Now they've got the full cast is signed on, like Arrested Development coming back on Netflix. Yeah, full on. Just like hot tip, done, right? And so they're doing all these like flash promotions. My lady and I was picking my lady up from work the other day. We're driving downtown, and this parking lot at 5th and Brazos, we look over as we're stopped at a stoplight, and it's
the banana or
the stair car.
Yeah.
So the stair car is just the Bluth Enterprises stair car is just sitting in the parking lot, and there are people up on it like taking pictures. So we jump out of the car, and there was just like, you know, just a crew, street team there, just like promoting the release, which is happening in May. And so they gave me this hat, and
Yeah.
it's like this week. It may already be out. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't even know.
I know. That's why they've got the damn stair car out, because nobody knows. It's gonna be just
I
like
thought they were done
it's gonna be just like season 3. Like nobody knows until like 3 years later, when everyone's like, "Oh, it was so awesome! Why didn't they make more?" So yes, make America Bluth again. Yeah. Is that cool with you? Cool. Other questions? No? All right, thanks guys. I will see you not next week, where you will be meeting with Brad Calhoun here for your seminar, but the week after I'll be back.